But welcome everyone, I'm glad that you're here. I'll turn it over to Stefan, who will more formally greet you. Thank you, Stefan.
Yes, welcome everyone. Wonderful day. Thanks for coming down. Thank you, Scott. My name is Stefan Brandstatter. I am the co-president of the Brattleboro area Jewish community, and I send apologies and regrets from our cantor Kate. She could not attend today, but she is with you in spirit. I want to thank the BAILA community, Brattleboro area, INTERFAITH, Leadership Alliance. It's always a tongue twister for hosting this, and Scott for having us here. The Alliance has been around, I guess, a couple of decades now, and they are involved in... Louder? Oh, okay. They're involved in all kinds of social action, justice, peace and justice, commitment activities. Started out as just a Catholic or a Christian organization, I guess 20 years ago, and it's evolved to what it is today. We thank them very much, and they hope they stick around for a long time. They do wonderful work. Quick note, this, as you well know, this event that we're here today is commemorating the 50th anniversary of the events that happened at the just drew blank. Stonewall. Thank you. The sun's heating me already. Stonewall nightclub. As it so happens to be that I was living in New York at that time, a few blocks away from the Stonewall nightclub. And I heard a lot of sirens going off and, activity. I looked out my window and there was just a horde of police cars and a lot of activity. But I didn't think anything of it because it's New York and things happen like that. But I didn't go chasing down, what it was all about. I found out the next day what happened. So it just so happens that I was in the neighborhood and I can't begin to tell you how stunned and shocked I was by the news that I found out the next day. And just one little other sidebar. I went to college in Boston University, and I had 3 roommates. One of them was from the Philippines. And one day we were walking down Commonwealth Avenue, I don't remember what we were talking about, and he volunteered to me and he shared with me that he was gay. He said, "I'm a homosexual." And I said, "So?" Okay. He was my best friend throughout college. So I've been, I've had gay friends, both homosexuals, lesbians, and now transgenders and so on. I see nothing wrong with it, just live and let live. So, without further ado, I want to introduce Michael Mario. He's going to the choir leader, and the community choir invite you to sing along with the choir, each of the above, and so on.
Anybody wants to do it? Yes, we've got it right here.
And in keeping with that, our first song is called "How Could Anyone Ever Tell You You Are Anything Less Than Beautiful?" I know folks from Guilford know this song. I'll run through it a couple of times, and you've got the lyrics. They just repeat. We'll repeat it 4 or 5 times. So anyone who knows the harmony, please join in with that too. How could anyone ever tell you you are anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you are less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you are anything
beautiful. How could anyone ever tell you you are less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you are less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How deeply you're connected to my soul.
I'm Reverend Audrey Walker from the First Congregational Church of West Brattleboro up on Western Avenue, and I'm here to celebrate with all of you this wonderful event that has led to this kind of gathering over the last 50 years. I'm bisexual myself. I'm living with my partner Sharon, and I have a trans sister, so I know how difficult it can be to live in the world when you are different than others, even today. So I want to say a little bit about Stonewall. Yes, it was in the 50s and the 60s that gays in our society were really treated badly. And I put the emphasis on badly, all kinds of different ways. I know my trans sister, even in the 80s, was beaten up. It's really, really hard. And so the Stonewall was a place in Greenwich Village. It happened, the uprising happened in 1969. And the uprising happened when the Stonewall, actually said it was a nightclub, a bar. It was one of those places in New York, in Greenwich Village, that was safe for the LGBTQ plus community. They, unlike other nightclubs in the area for gay folks, actually welcomed the, at that time thought to be the unsavory folks within the LGBTQ plus community, the transgender folks, the, let me think, the transgender folks, the, what am I trying to think of? Well, the butch women, the young, effeminate men, the homeless, homeless folks who were gay, and the drag queens. Mostly those folks were welcomed and found a place to be safe at the Stonewall Inn. But then on the night of June 28th, 1969, there was a police raid on it. They were cracking down on these kind of places, and especially Stonewall for its clientele. And there was an uprising. The people didn't let the police go unchallenged. And that was the beginning of the gay rights movement that we have today. It was the beginning. It was under, actually this happened under the backdrop of the Vietnam War protests, the civil rights movement, and all those other movements that were for people who were oppressed. And they finally felt a sense of power. that they were as important as the black community was, the other oppressed people. And it just led to more organizations being formed for gay rights, and we'll learn more about this in the film Inside, but I just wanted to give you a little taste of what that was about and why we're celebrating. And I'm really glad you're all here, and I'm glad that we have come this far so we can stand out here, wave our flags, and not really have anybody think twice about us. So thank you.
At this time, I'd like to ask Tom. Tom, you can come down here so everyone can hear you. Who will just give us an opening meditation or an opening prayer. Thank you, Tom, very much for being with us. And if you're having difficulty hearing, please feel free to come closer to us. I know sometimes the traffic is a competitor, so just feel we've got plenty of room. Feel free to come close. Thank you, Tom.
Okay. This came as a rather surprise for me that I was going to be on this program. And I see I've never been labeled as an agnostic before. I prefer being an agnostician.
Agnostic.
Yes. So I have paraphrased prayer. Oops, there it is. It was made by a Reverend Ann Day, but I've taken it and put it in a way that I think would appeal to a broader audience. Here's my paraphrase of this prayer. We are all part of a wondrous creation. The creation of lion and lizard, cedar and cactus, raindrop and river. We all praise for the splendor of the world. We are thankful that woven throughout the tapestry of our earth are also the varied threads of human diversity. We are of many colors and cultures, ages and classes, gender and sexual identities. Different and alike, we are all beloved people. We must free ourselves from fears of difference that divide and us. We must move to dismantle our attitudes and systems of prejudice. We must renew our commitment to make this a household of respect for all people. Gay, bisexual, lesbian, transgender, and straight. So we may all know the grace and challenge of respect. In our life together, may we have minds and hearts eager to learn and reluctant to judge. Thank you.
If we can join our voices together in a song against oppression. In the interest of volume, I'll put this way up in the tenor range. My apologies to anyone who is too high for it. We shall not give up the fight. We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. We shall not give up on peace. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. We shall not give up on peace. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started to put an end to bigotry. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started to put an end to bigotry. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. Together we'll have victory. Hand holding hand, hand holding hand. Victory, hand holding hand, hand holding hand, holding hand. Never ever put to
fight. We are bound to win. We are bound to win. We are bound to win. Never ever quit this fight. We are bound to win. We are bound to win. We are bound to win. We have only started. We have only started. We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'm going to speak up here because I think if I project, everyone can hear me as well, if not better, up here. When I began to investigate or research a little bit this Stonewall event in preparation for this commemoration, I came across, to my great surprise, a resolution which was passed by the Council for Christian Social Action of the United Church of Christ in 1969 on April 12th. So this resolution would have predated the Stonewall Uprising by at least 2 months. And when I read this resolution, I was actually quite shocked at two things. Number one, its prophetic nature, in the sense that this was a resolution that was publicly issued in 1969, I think way ahead of its time. And two, it also demonstrates, as the film we will soon see, the degree of violence and oppression that gays and lesbians and transgendered people experienced, well, all through human civilization up to the present. I'm not going to read the whole document, but what I do want to do is just read for you the resolutions at its conclusion. If any of you watched the debates yesterday, we saw that even though the civil rights movement happened in the 1950s and 60s, it is still very much still in the fore of our national consciousness. And the civil rights movement, even though it happened in the 50s and 60s, it is still happening now. And just as Stonewall and this resolution were issued and occurred in the 60s, this social movement also is still very much relevant and still occurring. But these resolutions, I think, just point to how far we have thus come. So it's the resolution dated April 12th, 1969 by the United Church of Christ Council for Christian Social Action reads, whereas homosexual practices between consenting adults in private endanger none of the properly protective functions of civil law. And whereas laws against consensual homosexual practices between adults in private violate the right to privacy and are virtually unenforceable except through the abhorrent practices of police entrapment and enticement. And whereas such laws have no effect on the degree of homosexuality, as indicated by various studies abroad showing that homosexuality exists to no greater extent in countries without laws than in the United States. And whereas present laws and government practices regarding employment and military service of homosexuals are based on false assumptions about the nature of homosexuality in general and the danger of homosexuals to society in particular. Therefore, the Christian Council for Social Action hereby declares its opposition to all laws which make private homosexual relations between consenting adults a crime, and thus urges their appeal. And it expresses its opposition to the total exclusion of homosexuals from public employment and from enlistment and induction into the armed forces, especially the dismissal of less than honorable discharges from the armed forces for homosexual practices with consulting adults in private. The Council opposes, where they exist, police practices of entrapment and enticement in their attempts to enforce laws against homosexual practices and solicitation. We will very shortly, as we now proceed into the film room, the reason why many of these resolutions were adopted and were publicized. Please join with me, follow me into the film room, and we will learn a little bit more and perhaps seek some refuge from the sun as well. After the film, we will just rejoin here and conclude.
What happened at Stonewall in 1969 had a very profound effect on a lot of, not only the LGBT community, but it jump-started, I think, the gay rights movement. Although there were gay rights movements as far back as 1920s that I know of. And it also had a very profound effect on individual lives. I'm going to tell you about one of those lives. This man named William Bill was a gay, closeted man, a pretty good lawyer, an alcoholic, and my best friend. We knew each other from grade school through high school. I think you knew a little bit about the uprising. He was in it. He was at the Stonewall that evening and participated in the uprising. I was nowhere near Christopher Street at that time. I had no idea what was going on. I got a call about, I guess it was about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was Bill. And I said, "Why are you calling me at this hour?" He said, "I'm in jail." I said, "What are you doing in jail?" You know.
He's a lawyer, right?
He's a lawyer. And he said, "Well, just come down and get me." So, all right. So I go down, grab my checkbook, go down. And he was pretty banged up. And I'm not going to go into gory details about the police station. That's a whole other story. Although I think that the chief of police recently apologized for the police department's activities on that night. A little too late. Anyway, Bill was pretty banged up. I finally got him out of there. We took a cab, took him home, and I said, "Look, why don't you jump in the shower? I'll make some breakfast, and you can, relax." He said, "No, I have to do something first." I was all right. So he goes, runs around the apartment, gets all the liquor that he owns, the unopened bottles. He said to me, "You're taking that home." So I said, "All right." So he dumps all of the open bottles of wine and liquor, whatever they were, down the sink. And I said, "What are you doing?" So I figured this guy really got knocked on the head, because I thought, what the heck is going on? First I thought he was going to start drinking, but he didn't. And he said to me, I said, "Bill, what are you doing?" And he said, "I'm changing my life." Excuse me, sorry. "I'm changing my life. For the first time, I feel that I'm worthy." And he said, "I don't feel like a freak anymore." And I said, okay. I didn't say anything because I didn't know what to say. So he said, "And you're going to help me change my life." I said, "Yeah, whatever, of course." So to make a long story short, getting him off booze wasn't easy. I don't want to make it sound easy. But between me and some of our other friends, and he joined AA and did well. He then gave up his job with a law firm in Manhattan, and he opened a private practice, and worked almost exclusively on gay rights. And during the AIDS epidemic, he helped a lot of people get housing, people who were thrown out of their apartments. It was a terrible time. And what I forgot to say was he left, in the refrigerator, he left a 6-pack of beer. And he said to me at that time, "That is going to save me." I said, okay. So anyway, he was sober all that time from 1969 until, unfortunately, he succumbed to the AIDS virus, and he died in January of 1985. And did a lot of good works for the LGBT community and for individuals, and helping them get medical care, keeping their apartments. And in his refrigerator, now this is 1969 to 1985, there was still the 6-pack of beer. So he remained sober all of those years. And the Stonewall event changed his life dramatically, and turned out to be good for a lot of people. So that's my story. The film you're going to see will give you a lot more information on why, when, where, and
Hey guys, welcome to Hip Hughes History, where I'm gonna get all gay on you. Not in a creepy way. We're gonna take a look in this episode at the 1969 Stonewall riots. But first, we're gonna hopscotch a little bit through the beginning of the 20th century so we can find out what's going on. All right, there's not too much gay history in American history prior to World War I, mainly because everything is so closeted and secretive. But we do, in 1912, have an incident called the Portland Vice Scandal, which occurred in Portland, Oregon, when a young man who was arrested for shoplifting seemed to blame a couple older gay men on what he had done. And bada boom, bada bing, the next thing you know, we have a forced sexual sterilization bill in Portland. So if you were caught being gay, they would sexually sterilize you. In the 1920s, we have Harvard University creating secret courts to out gay professors and gay students and expel them and fire them from their jobs. And in World War I, the U.S. Army created what was called the Blue Discharge, which, because there was no rule that you couldn't be gay, this was a way of getting rid of gay soldiers. And the Blue Discharge were used in both World War I and World War II. And actually, the GI Bill specifically eliminated people that had blue discharges from receiving any kind of benefits from the GI Bill. In the Roaring 20s, we actually have kind of a flourishing of gay culture because everything was kind of pushed under the ground because of Prohibition. So you have speakeasies in major cities that are making it easier for gays to get together, to drink, to dance, to do those types of things because the police don't know what's going on. And then in 1924, we have the first gay society. It's a temporary gay society called the Society for Human Rights that was founded by Henry Gerber in Illinois. They actually produced a couple pamphlets called Friendship and Freedom, and that lasted for about a month before somebody turned to Ben for being gay, and they all got arrested. And then really after World War II, we have the explosion of the Red Scare. And homosexuals are being included on these lists with communists because they are thought to be more susceptible to blackmail. But there certainly is also an anti-gay discriminatory thing going on there. The FBI, police, the State Department, even the post office is tracking anybody thought to be a suspected homosexual and keeping their names. And between 1947 and 1950, there were over 4,000 discharges from the U.S. Army for people being gay, and over 400 state employees, government employees that were fired from their jobs for being gay. So this brings us to right around 1950, and I think it's time that we got a real organization. Of the gay rights movement is Harry Hay. Harry Hay in 1950 created the Mattachine Society. And you'll notice a lot of these groups, including the lesbian group that was founded around the same time, the Daughters of Bilitis, the DOB. They're not including gay and lesbian in their names because they're trying to kind of keep it subversive. There was actually, it was almost like a Mason society where you would have levels of secrecy, and the higher you got up in leadership, the more that you would be informed. But everything is on the up and up. They're actually battling stereotypes. They don't like the idea of queens and cross-dressers and transgender peoples because it's kind of filling in that stereotype where they want to portray themselves as dresses and suits and ties and kind of all this stuff. And in 1965, the Mattachine Society in D.C. under Frank Carney staged the first gay protest in the United States. There's a picture of it right there. And you can see that they're in dresses and they're in suits and they're acting very normal. But even people in the Mattachine Society were outraged when they saw these people protesting because they didn't think that putting it in people's faces was the best way to get any movement on that. We also have the American Psychiatric Association in 1952 putting homosexuality on a list of mental diseases. And the study that they used to make that declaration was on a study of mental patients who were gay. So, yeah, if you take a lot of mental patients that are gay, you'll probably find out that they're mental patients. Actually, Evelyn Hooker, a psychiatrist, did her own study in 1956, released it to the American Psychiatric Association, that showed that there was no difference in mental deficiencies between heterosexuals and homosexuals. But the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, is going to keep homosexuality on a list of diseases from 1952 to 1973. We have a little bit of movement in the Supreme Court. The first Supreme Court gay case is One Inc. versus Olson in 1958 that involved a magazine called One, kind of gay publication that was being sent through the mail that the United States Postal Service was refusing to deliver. And they won that case. And it's kind of a landmark victory because now they can communicate through mail. That's a big deal because they can start to network and create larger organizations. In 1966, we have our first real act of civil disobedience that doesn't get a lot of press. It's called the Compton cafeteria riots. And this is mainly the transgender community, but the police in Compton went into this restaurant where the workers had called them because these people were being gay and they wanted to be served. And one of the transgender women threw a cup of coffee in one of the cops' face, and the next thing you know, there was a melee and chaos, and they were ripping things up and burning things up. But Compton's cafeteria didn't spread. It didn't get enough publicity, and this is going to prime us for Greenwich Village, 1969. So Greenwich Village is kind of in the heart of rebel territory, right? This is where the beatniks made their path. And you have gay beatniks like William Burroughs and Allen Ginsberg, who were openly writing about homosexuality in the 1950s. But in the early 1960s, the mayor of New York City, Robert Wagner, actually began cracking down pretty hardcore on a lot of these bars that were serving gays. And it's important to understand that these aren't gay-owned bars. The mob owns these bars. But because it's the 1964 World Fair coming up and Wagner wants to clean up the city, they are basically entrapping people. They are throwing people in jail left and right in order to clean up the city. And even when Mayor John Lindsay was elected and he promised to stop all of that harassment, the New York State Liquor Authority still was going after bars serving gays because they claimed that they couldn't give a license to any bar that was disorderly. And because homosexuals considered to be disorderly, they weren't going to serve them. This led to the 1966 Julius Sip-In. The Mattachine Society in 1966 sent 3 guys into the Julius. They announced, "We are homosexuals and we would like to be served," and you can see the bartender right there covering up their drinks. So there are people trying to get attention. It's not radical. It's almost in the spirit of the civil rights nonviolence kind of methodology, but it's not gaining traction. So this brings us to the late 1960s and the Stonewall Inn on Christopher Street, which is a mob bar. It was owned by the Genovese family, and everybody knew it as the gay bar in the city. But it didn't have a liquor license. They washed their glasses in a tub in the back. The toilets were overflowing. There were no fire exits. And they were paying off police every week to keep themselves open. And even by paying the police off, they were still getting raided once a month. But they were being tipped off by the police. So the raids were almost like a kind of formal event that everybody knew about. But There's a lot of reasons why people think that the police went to close down the Stonewall on June 28, 1969. But the theory that I keep hearing over and over is that the mob was making more money on blackmailing the patrons of the Stonewall and like stockbrokers and stuff, and they weren't ready to give kickbacks to the police. So the police kind of had enough with the Genovese family. So they made an unannounced raid on June 28, 1969 at about 1:20 in the morning. There were about 205 people at the Stonewall, and the way that the raids would normally work is first there was a peephole. You couldn't get into the bar unless the bouncer saw you, recognized you, some kind of idea that you were gay. But the police just announced they were police, and they rammed that door down. And the way they usually did it was they would line everybody up, and if you had ID, they would let you go. And if you didn't have ID, or if you were a woman wearing man's clothes or a man wearing women's clothes, you were going to get arrested. But for some reason, things didn't go smoothly that night. There's claims that the cops were sexually harassing some of the lesbians, touching them inappropriately. Some of the transgender women in the bar started to kind of talk back. Men were refusing to show their ID, and because some of the patrol wagons hadn't arrived yet, they were lining people up, and there were like 100, 150 people lined up, and there were about 200 or 300 people in the crowd outside that was growing. And this is a spontaneous event. This was not planned. So there's a lot of reasons why it probably happened. People were probably just bottled up with anger and frustration, and this was the opportunity. But there was a lesbian named Storme Delavarrie who, when she was arrested and she was going back out to the car, she shouted to the crowd, "Why don't you guys do something?" And that was the trigger. And suddenly the place erupted. Coins and stones started getting thrown at the cops. The cops started backing up from these, mob of 200 and 300 gay people. They pushed them back into the bar. The police had to retreat, and they grabbed a couple people they had arrested, including David Van Ronk, the famous folk singer, who's not gay, but because he's a member of the beat community and the anti-police protest community, he's there. And suddenly he's in the bar with about 10 cops, trapped as this mob outside tries to get in. They're breaking windows, they're burning garbage and sticking it into the windows, and they eventually pulled a meter off the ground, and they used it as a battering ram to break the door down. So now that they're backed up in the bar, the TPF arrives, the Tactical Police Force, because it's now like a full-blown riot. And the story is that the transgender women lined the streets as the TPF came, and they started doing the Rockefeller kick line, yelling, "We are the Stonewall girls. We wear our hair in curls. We don't wear underwear. We show our pubic hair." The cops probably didn't like that. And that's when they took out the batons and they started beating heads. And it's kind of the geography that allowed this riot to happen, or the building patterns. There's tons of like crooked alleyways and places to hide. But from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock that morning, it was like Keystone Cops. They're running around trying to arrest people. There's hundreds, maybe 1,000 people now that are rioting and burning and turning police cars over. And at about 4 in the morning, it quieted it down. But the next night, people started arriving early. They were graffitiing the walls next to the Stonewall with terms of gay pride. And that night, the cops came out in force again, and they had another riot for about 4 hours, chasing people around and confrontations and people getting beat up. It rained the next couple days. That was a Monday and Tuesday. There was a small event where the Village Voice had printed an anti-gay kind of slant on that story, and about 1,000 people showed up at the Village Voice offices, threatening to burn them down. And then that Wednesday night, there was one more night of riots, and really that's it. Gay people after that, at least in that area, are not going to go back into the closet. And after Stonewall, we start getting the first organizations with gay in their titles, like the Gay Liberation Front and the Gay Activist Association, that are going to now take a very more aggressive role in trying to change the tide of anti-gay discrimination in the United States. They would zap people. They would show up in reporters' faces and ask them questions about, gay rights and such like that. But really what's going to make this memorable is a year later. And that's June 28th, 1970, where we have the first gay pride parade in New York City. And then by the next year, it's spreading across the country. And really, now we have a gay rights movement, like it or not. So we hope that you learned something about Stonewall, and we certainly thank you for watching a Hip Hughes History video. If you haven't subscribed, you can do that right there with that big red button. It's crazy. There's like 400 videos. You could watch it forever, and then you would probably not want to watch it anymore. But either way, thanks a lot, guys. Remember, where attention goes, energy flows, and we'll see you next time that you press my buttons.
Our next song to sing together is True Colors. You with the sad eyes, don't be discouraged, oh I realize it's hard to take courage in a world full of people. You can lose sight of it all, and the darkness inside you is so small. But I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors. That's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show. True colors are beautiful like a rainbow. Show me a smile. Don't be unhappy and remember why someone laughing if this world makes you crazy. Taking all you can bear, you call me up because you know I'll be there. And I'll see your true colors shining through. I'll see your true colors. That's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show your true colors. True colors are beautiful like a rainbow. I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors. That's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show your true colors. True colors are beautiful like a rainbow.
I'm Mary Lindquist from St. Michael's Episcopal Church, and I'm very thankful that the shade is now upon this podium. So please join me in this responsive prayer. We are grateful for the gift of our lives and the gift of others in our lives.
Each of us is created with dignity and worth.
We are called to love each other and to do nothing to ourselves that we would find hateful to ourselves.
We honor the many ways that people live and love.
We repent for the times when our faith traditions have named lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people unworthy.
Love does not exclude. We are all worthy.
We suffer when LGBTIQ+ persons are oppressed, excluded, and shamed by religious people who overlook the fundamental call to justice in our scriptures.
True justice flourishes when we can live with authenticity and integrity.
May we work to build a community where LGBTIQ+ people are celebrated as full and equal members, recognizing their many gifts.
We celebrate sexual and gender diversity as a blessing that enriches us all.
looking forward to that day. What a wonderful world can be. I see trees green, red roses too. I see them bloom for you, and I feel like what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue, clouds of white, bright blessed days, dark sacred nights, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Maybe just introduce yourself.
Catherine Barrett, and I'm reading from a Baha'i prayer by Baha'u'llah, which was the prophet. O my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal to them their great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide of thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, leave them not to themselves, but guide their steps to the light of thy knowledge and the cheer of their hearts by thy love. Verily thou art their helper and their Lord.
This is a moment where we can give thanks. I especially thank Center Church for giving us this beautiful place and public place, central place to hold this event. To Scott, who put this whole ceremony together, and to Audrey for her inspiration, and Michael for his beautiful music, for all the choir that came, to John for his story, which opened up our hearts and minds, and Mary and Stefan, everyone who's come here today. I'm supposed to give a benediction, but I've decided, with your permission, I'd like to give a charge.
Even better.
I know that for me, as I'm very much old enough to remember everything we've talked about, but also with that comes remembering dear people who've passed on and people who fought hard. And I think when I go to that place of remembering, that's what gives me energy to continue to work. So I would just say, let us remember all those who suffered invisibly and visibly before Stonewall. And let us remember all those who suffered and died from AIDS before people cared enough to look for a cure. And let us remember the doctors and nurses and their loved ones who loved them enough to push for a cure. And let us remember all those whose courage rose up 50 years ago today to open up the closets, to let all these gifted people come forward into our lives so that we could love them. All those who were injured, all those who were jailed, all that courage. Let us remember the worthy ones and the gifted ones. Let's remember all our brothers and sisters in the GLBTIQ+ community. And let us remember that we too have courage and can help in the change that this world needs. Let us go forth with hope in our hearts. Amen.
Amen. If I may I request the celebrants who participated in this service, and Susie, just to come together for a photo op. I want to include clergy and all of those who celebrated, Stefan and Mary, Audrey, if we could come in. I'm going to ask Bonnie if she can take the picture for us. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for coming.
Yes, people.
So what if we all stand here? Front here? I can go down low. Like this?
Don't even go down. Don't even go there.
Audrey. And John, you were a celebrant with us. Michael, especially you. You had the biggest role.
You gotta get tighter, kids.
I like
You
to
can turn
talk
it
my
this way,
head.
Bonnie. You can turn it sideways too.
Switch over here.
That one.
Is everybody in?
Bonnie, you can turn it sideways.
Look holy.
Look holier. Holier than thou, even. I was just saying something.
I hope you guys send these to me.
I will, Mary.
Okay.
Got you, Caroline.
Okay.
Or sideways too, Bonnie.
You too.
I got you covered just in case.
Good. Thank you all very much. And thank you, Audrey, for bringing the flag.
Do you want to sing these or?
Better late than never.
Yes, you know.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for you, and I feel myself wandering alone. I see skies of blue, clouds of white, bright blessed days, dark sacred nights, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. And I think to myself, what a wonderful